Ethan Cole had never been one to hesitate when it came to danger, but when the first whimper cut through the night, raw and fragile, something inside him snapped. The small hut in the distance was nothing but a flickering silhouette against the dark sky, but the cry, it was unmistakable, a puppy trapped inside. And the voice, that was something else, something that made his blood run cold. "Hang on," he muttered to himself, though his feet were already moving faster, racing toward the inferno. He could see the smoke, feel the heat on his face, but the only thing in his mind was the desperate sound of that whimper. "Duke!" he barked, and the German shepherd at his side lunged forward, nose twitching, ears sharp. Duke had been by his side through every mission, every firefight. He wasn't just a dog, he was family. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. The fire crackled louder as they reached the ruins. The smell of burning wood and the sharp sting of smoke filled the air. Ethan didn't waste time. He threw himself into the wreckage, tearing away charred beams with his bare hands, his breath coming in ragged gasps. There, beneath the wreckage, a small, trembling puppy. Blackened fur, eyes wide with terror, stuck beneath a broken beam. Ethan didn't think. He just moved, pulling the pup into his arms as Duke barked and circled around him. "You're safe now," he whispered, cradling the tiny creature. But before he could turn away, something stopped him. The wind shifted, carrying a voice, faint, barely audible over the roar of the fire. "Please, don't leave me." Ethan froze, his body tense with shock. A child's voice, a child trapped inside the flames. His stomach churned as his instincts screamed at him to go, get the puppy to safety. But the whisper from inside the hut had already begun to haunt him. The flames crackled louder, but the words from the burning building were seared into his mind. "Please, don't leave me." He knew he couldn't leave without checking. The mission was no longer about just getting the puppy to safety. It was about the voice. Someone who needed him. Without thinking, Ethan turned back toward the blaze, pushing through the heat and smoke. Duke barked urgently beside him, his eyes watching for danger. But Ethan's mind was fixed on the voice, and nothing else mattered. The fire was getting worse. The roof of the hut was already collapsing, but inside, there was still someone he needed to find. The smoke stung his eyes, but his determination pushed him forward. Then another sound, a crack in the wood, followed by a heavy footstep crunching in the snow. Someone else was out there. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Was it too late? Had someone been waiting for him, hoping he would make this mistake? The footsteps drew closer. He had no choice. The voice had called to him, and he couldn't walk away. The flames roared behind Ethan, the heat so intense it felt like his skin was burning off. His heart raced as he sprinted toward the collapsing structure, the weight of the puppy in his arms feeling like nothing compared to the urgency clawing at him. Every step was a battle against time, against the fire, against the growing sense of dread gnawing at his gut. Duke barked, his ears flat against his head, as if urging him to hurry. Ethan's breath came in sharp, painful gasps, the smoke thick in his lungs, but his feet moved faster, propelled by the need to save whoever was inside. He reached the front door, now little more than a singed frame, and without hesitation he ducked under a beam that had already started to fall. It groaned loudly, splintering in the fire. Ethan ignored it, eyes fixed ahead as he darted deeper into the wreckage. "Please, don't leave me." The whisper, faint but unmistakable, cut through the noise of the flames, guiding him forward. It was closer now, a voice, so desperate, so weak. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as his hands scraped against the burning timbers, looking for any sign of life. "Hold on!" he shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the crackle of fire. Duke had already made his way through the charred doorway, his body low to the ground, his nose working furiously to sniff out the source of the cry. Ethan didn't need to tell him where to go. His dog knew exactly what to do. Then, as the smoke swirled and the fire hissed, Ethan saw it, what he had been looking for. Behind a fallen beam, there was a small shape. A child, lying motionless, her tiny body crushed beneath the weight of the broken structure. Her face was covered in soot, her clothes torn, and her eyes were closed. A girl. Ethan's stomach lurched. The last words, the whisper, were now a scream in his mind. He had to get to her. Without thinking, he dropped to his knees, the heat of the fire lashing against his skin. He reached out, pushing aside the beams with all the strength he could muster, desperation flooding him. He had no idea how much time he had left. Every second felt like a year. The flames were encroaching, and every moment felt like it could be their last. And then, as if the world had stopped spinning, he felt it, a faint pulse beneath her wrist. Ethan's heart leapt in his chest. She was alive. He didn't waste a second. His hands shook as he lifted her, cradling her body close to his chest, just as he had done with the puppy. She was small, too small to be in this kind of danger. Her skin was cold, her lips slightly blue, but she was breathing. "Ethan, behind you!" Duke barked urgently, pulling Ethan out of his trance. Ethan turned, his eyes wide, as he saw the flames now crawling along the edges of the door. The structure was coming down fast. "Stay with me," Ethan whispered to the girl, her small head resting against his shoulder as he backed away. He could feel the heat rising around him, closing in, but he couldn't afford to panic. Not now. Not when he had just found her. As Ethan turned, he heard another noise, a voice, low and calm, cutting through the chaos. "You should have stayed away." Ethan froze, his blood running cold. The voice came from the shadows. A figure emerged from the smoke, tall and broad, wearing a dark cloak. Ethan couldn't see his face, but the presence of the man was undeniable. His voice, smooth and unsettling, echoed in the midst of the fire. "You think you can just take her and walk away?" the man asked, his tone chilling. Ethan's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but the fire crackled louder, the world around them shrinking as the smoke clouded his vision. The flames were so close now, the heat unbearable. "She's just a child," Ethan said, trying to stay calm, clutching the girl tighter in his arms. "She's coming with me. Get out of the way." The man's laugh was low and menacing. "You don't get it, do you? She's not the one who needs saving." Before Ethan could react, a sudden gust of wind kicked up, the flames dancing higher in the night. The man stepped back into the smoke, his figure vanishing into the dark. Ethan didn't hesitate. His only focus now was getting the girl out. He sprinted forward, Duke by his side, the puppy still nestled in his other arm. The heat from the flames felt like it was burning through his jacket, but he couldn't slow down, not until he was far enough away. As he crossed the threshold, the last of the hut's roof collapsed with a deafening crash. Ethan risked one last look behind him, but there was nothing. Just the fire and the swirling smoke. Ethan didn't stop running. His boots pounded against the snow as he made his way farther into the woods, the smoke still swirling behind him. The girl, limp and pale in his arms, seemed too small to have survived the hellish inferno, but her pulse, faint as it was, told him she was alive. The puppy, too, was still breathing, tucked safely against his chest. Ethan wasn't sure how long he'd been running, but the icy air burned his lungs with every breath. Duke trotted beside him, silent and alert, his ears twitching at every crack of the forest, every rustle of leaves, as if the shadows themselves were whispering danger. The flames were behind them now, but Ethan knew better than to think they were out of danger. The man, the one with the chilling voice, had left a mark on his mind. Who was he? Why had he been there? And why had he tried to stop Ethan from rescuing the girl? A voice suddenly broke through his thoughts. A weak, trembling whisper from the girl he was carrying. "Please, don't leave me." Her words caught Ethan off guard, his heart tightening in his chest. She was awake, barely, but awake. He felt her cold fingers grasp the front of his jacket, trying to hold on, but her grip was weak, fragile. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice strained. "You're safe now. You're going to be okay." The girl's head rested against his shoulder, her small form shivering despite the warmth of his body. She was covered in soot and ash, her clothes torn, but her face, despite the grime, was clear. Young and innocent, filled with so much fear that it nearly broke Ethan's heart. Ethan moved faster, his eyes scanning the snow-covered landscape ahead. They needed shelter. And soon. Minutes later, Ethan stumbled upon a small cabin, hidden behind a thick cluster of trees. The door was cracked open, and from the looks of it, no one had been here in a while. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them out of the elements. With one last burst of effort, Ethan pushed through the door, his body stiff and exhausted from the adrenaline of the rescue. He set the girl down carefully on a worn wooden chair, the puppy still nestled in his arms. Duke padded over to the corner and lay down with a low, contented sigh. Ethan kneeled beside the girl, pulling a small medical kit from his bag. His hands were steady despite the fear gnawing at him. The fire had left him with little time to assess the damage, but now that they were here, he could breathe. He needed to check for injuries, and fast. Her eyes fluttered open, locking with his, filled with confusion. "Are you real?" she asked, her voice trembling. I heard a voice. Before, I thought you left me." Ethan's heart clenched at the words. He didn't know how to answer. The whisper had been clear, too clear to ignore, but he couldn't explain that right now, not when she needed him to focus. "You're safe now," he said, forcing a smile as he cleaned the dirt and soot from her face. "You're not alone anymore." But inside, something was wrong. The words she had spoken earlier, the ones about being left behind, echoed in his mind. Who had been in that hut with her? Why had she been left there in the first place? Ethan gently pressed a bandage against a small cut on her forehead, wincing at how fragile she felt in his hands. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The girl hesitated, her eyes darting to the window, as if expecting someone to appear in the doorway. "Ava. My name is Ava." Ethan nodded, his heart aching for the lost little girl in front of him. "Ava, you're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." But as he finished tending to her wounds, a thought gnawed at him, a cold, heavy thought. The voice from the burning hut, it had been too familiar. The whisper. It wasn't just a cry for help. It had been a warning. The crackling fire in the corner of the cabin cast long shadows across the walls, flickering as if trying to tell a story of its own. Ava sat quietly, wrapped in a blanket that Ethan had found in the small room, her wide eyes never leaving the warmth of the flames. Ethan sat across from her, his mind racing as he kept glancing at the puppy, now resting peacefully near the fire, then back to the girl. The whisper, the voice from the fire. It was still fresh in his mind, and something in him knew that this wasn't just a random act of fate. No, there was something more to this, something deeper, and that gnawing feeling in his gut told him that he had just uncovered the tip of an iceberg. The silence in the room was thick, only broken by the occasional creaking of wood and the low rumble of Duke, who had curled up beside the door, his eyes half closed, but still watchful. Ava shifted in her seat, her fingers clutching the edges of her blanket. Ethan could see the weight of her thoughts pressing on her young shoulders, even though she wasn't speaking. She was still in shock. He could see it in the way she barely moved, in how her gaze would occasionally flicker nervously to the shadows, as if expecting something, or someone, to emerge. "Ava," Ethan finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was gentle, but it carried a sense of urgency. "I need to know what happened back there. Who else was in that hut with you? And why was it set on fire?" The girl's eyes shifted away from his. She seemed small, almost fragile, as though the words were too heavy for her to carry. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but hesitated, her lips trembling. "Who were you with?" Ethan pressed gently, trying to keep the tension from his voice. "Did you hear anyone else in there? Anyone who might have—" "Please," Ava whispered, cutting him off. Her voice was quiet but strained, filled with a raw desperation that struck Ethan to his core. "I don't know who they were. I didn't mean to. I didn't know what was happening." Ethan leaned forward, trying to meet her gaze. "What do you mean?" Ava's small body shuddered as she looked down, her hands trembling. She spoke so quietly, it was almost as if she were talking to herself. "I just wanted to stay warm. But then the man came." Her voice cracked, and she swallowed hard, her face paler than before. "He said I had to stay in there, that no one was coming for me." Ethan's stomach dropped. A man. The same man who had appeared in the smoke, the one whose voice had haunted him. The one who had warned him to stay away. Ethan pushed the thought aside, focusing on Ava. "Did he hurt you?" She shook her head slowly, but there was something in her eyes that made Ethan's chest tighten. "No, he just told me to wait, that I couldn't leave. But I don't know why, I didn't understand. And then the fire came." A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine. He had suspected something was wrong when he'd seen the man's presence in the firelight. But now the pieces were starting to fall into place. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just trying to hurt her. He was trying to hide something. "I'm sorry," Ava said. Suddenly, her voice barely a whisper, like she was apologizing for something that wasn't her fault. "I didn't mean for you to come back for me. I didn't want to cause trouble." Ethan's heart clenched at the girl's words. She didn't deserve any of this. Her life had been ripped apart, and here she was, carrying the weight of it alone. And he had no answers for her. He had no explanation, only more questions. "You didn't cause anything," he said firmly, walking over to her and sitting beside her on the chair. "You're safe now. You're not alone. We'll figure this out." As he sat there, the firelight flickering between them, Ethan's mind raced through the possibilities. The whisper, the fire, the man, everything felt connected. But how? Why? And most terrifying of all, who was behind all of this? Just then, Duke's ears perked up, his body stiffening. Ethan noticed and turned his head sharply. The dog was on alert, eyes narrowed toward the door. The quiet crack of snow outside. Someone was out there. Without a word, Ethan stood up, his instincts already in overdrive. Duke immediately followed him, moving silently across the room. He crouched by the door, peering through a small crack in the wood. The storm outside had worsened, and snow was blowing fiercely, but there was no mistaking the shadow moving past the cabin. "Stay here," Ethan whispered to Ava, his voice low but steady. "Stay quiet?" Ava nodded, clutching the blanket tighter around her, her eyes wide with fear. Ethan moved with precision, pulling his rifle from his bag, his fingers tight around the stock. He motioned for Duke to follow, and together they moved to the window. The shadow stopped. Right outside. Ethan's heart pounded as he strained his ears. He had no idea who was out there, but he could feel the tension in the air, like something was about to snap. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the shadow moved, disappearing into the swirling storm. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. No, whoever it was, they were watching, waiting, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was far from over. Ethan remained crouched by the window, eyes scanning the storm outside. His pulse hammered in his chest, the eerie stillness of the forest amplifying the tension. Duke stood next to him, still alert, his ears pricked as if waiting for a signal from his handler. Ethan's gaze shifted toward the door, then back to the shadow that had vanished into the night. Who was it? And why did it feel like they were being watched? After what felt like an eternity, Ethan let out a long breath, standing slowly. He glanced over at Ava, still huddled by the fire, her wide eyes filled with fear. "Stay here," Ethan said, his voice steady but firm. "I'll check outside. Keep the puppy safe." Ava nodded, clutching the blanket tighter around her small frame, her face pale. Ethan's heart softened, but he knew he couldn't let his guard down. Whoever had been outside wasn't just a passerby. They were too deliberate, too careful. He turned to Duke. "Stay with her." The dog gave a low growl, then sat by Ava, as if understanding the weight of the command. Ethan moved quickly to the door, checking that his rifle was securely slung over his shoulder. His boots crunched in the snow as he stepped outside, the cold air biting at his face. The wind howled, sending snow swirling in every direction, but Ethan's focus remained razor-sharp. The shadow, whoever it had been, was still out there, lurking just beyond the trees. The faintest sound caught his ear, something moving in the woods. Ethan froze, then motioned for Duke to follow. His K9 trotted silently beside him, his head low, nose to the ground. The darkness of the forest was thick, the snow muffling most sounds, but Ethan's senses were honed. He knew they weren't alone. He could feel it. They moved deeper into the woods, the trees blocking out the moonlight, creating an eerie, claustrophobic atmosphere. The air was thick with the scent of pine and smoke, but something felt off. Something was wrong. Suddenly Duke stopped, his body tense, growling low. Ethan's hand instinctively went to his rifle, his muscles coiling, ready for anything. "Duke, find it," Ethan whispered. The dog's growl grew louder, his body rigid with focus. Slowly, cautiously, he started moving again, nose to the ground, following a scent. Ethan followed closely, his eyes darting around the darkened forest, watching for any sign of movement. And then, through the trees, he saw it, a figure moving in the distance. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't make out much through the snowstorm, but the shape was unmistakable. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark cloak. The same figure he had seen earlier, standing by the burning hut. The same voice that had warned him to stay away. "Stop!" Ethan called out, his voice cutting through the howling wind. The figure paused, then slowly turned toward Ethan, a silhouette against the falling snow. Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. "Who are you?" His voice was firm but demanding. The figure didn't speak at first. Instead, it took a step forward, moving slowly, deliberately, as if testing Ethan's resolve. "I should have known you'd come for her." The man's voice was low, cold, and filled with a chilling calmness that sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. "Who is she?" Ethan asked, his mind racing. "What do you want with her?" The man's eyes glowed in the dark, his face shadowed by the hood of his cloak. "She's not just a child to be saved. She's a key to something bigger. You have no idea what you've stumbled into." Ethan's instincts screamed at him to retreat, to get Ava to safety, but the man's words echoed in his mind. A key? What did that mean? And who was this man, really? "I don't care about your games," Ethan said, his voice steady, though the weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. "Let her go." The man chuckled, but the sound was devoid of humor. "You think she'll be safe here, with you? You have no idea what's out there, what's coming. It's already too late." Before Ethan could respond, the man turned and melted into the darkness, disappearing into the storm. "Wait!" Ethan shouted, but the man was already gone. Duke's growl grew louder, but the figure was no longer in sight. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. The wind howled, but now there was an unsettling quiet in the air. His mind raced. Who was that man? What did he mean by a key? With a final glance at the spot where the figure had vanished, Ethan made his decision. He couldn't waste any more time. He had to get back to Ava. Turning quickly, he headed back toward the cabin, his breath coming out in sharp bursts as he ran through the snow. Duke was close behind him, and although Ethan couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him, he couldn't afford to be distracted. He needed answers. Ethan arrived back at the cabin, his boots heavy in the snow, but his heart felt lighter as he saw the glow of the fire through the window. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. Ava was still there, curled up by the fire with the puppy, her face weary but calm. Duke immediately went to her, lying at her feet. Ethan closed the door behind him, locking it firmly. He was silent for a moment, taking in the room. Ava looked up at him, her eyes tired, but filled with curiosity. "Is it safe?" she asked quietly. Ethan sat down next to her, his fingers still trembling from the cold. He glanced at Duke, then back at the girl. "For now, but we can't stay here long." Ava nodded slowly, her eyes drifting to the puppy in her lap. The small animal was sleeping soundly, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. "Who was that man, Ethan?" Ava's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "What did he mean?" Ethan didn't have the answers, but something told him that the truth was far darker than he could have imagined. He didn't know who the man was or what he meant by a key, but he knew one thing for sure: they weren't safe yet. And whatever was coming, it was closing in fast. The fire crackled in the corner of the cabin, its warmth a comforting contrast to the icy coldness still gnawing at Ethan's bones. Ava sat quietly beside him, the puppy nestled in her arms, its small body rising and falling with each shallow breath. The silence between them felt heavy, like the air before a storm, thick with unspoken words. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the man, the voice from the fire. It echoed in his mind, twisting into something more sinister with every passing second. "She's a key to something bigger." The words haunted him, replaying in his head like a broken record. What did that mean? What could a little girl like Ava possibly be a key to? He glanced at her, still curled up by the fire, her wide eyes fixed on the flames. She looked so small, so fragile, yet there was something about her, a strength perhaps that Ethan couldn't place. She wasn't just a survivor. There was more to her, and somehow he knew it. He had to find out what it was. "Stay here," Ethan said, his voice low but firm, as he stood up and moved toward the small table by the window. He grabbed the map he had tucked away in his pack, spreading it out in front of him. The snowstorm outside still raged, but the map was clear, and it marked something important. Ethan traced a line on the map with his finger, stopping at a small red X, barely visible but bold enough to catch his attention. It was located in the middle of the woods, far from here, deep into the mountains. It had been a remote military outpost abandoned years ago, but what was it doing, marked on this map? And why had the man mentioned it? A voice broke Ethan from his thoughts, soft, uncertain. "Ethan, what's happening? Why is that man after me? Who is he?" Ethan turned to look at Ava, her eyes wide, filled with confusion and fear. She hadn't said much since he'd carried her to safety, but the silence between them had begun to feel like an unbearable weight. He didn't want to tell her the truth, not yet. She had been through enough. But he couldn't lie to her either. "I don't know," Ethan admitted quietly. "But I'm going to find out. I promise you that." Ava's lips trembled, her gaze falling to the puppy in her arms. I remember something," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "A voice. It said I was special, that I had a part to play in all of this." Ethan's blood ran cold as her words hung in the air. His mind raced. A part to play. The man had said the same thing. A key. "Do you remember anything else, Ava?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle but insistent. Ava shook her head, her long brown hair falling around her face. "No, just the fire. And the man. I didn't want to go with him, but he said I had to. That I was important." Ethan's thoughts raced, piecing the puzzle together. Whoever this man was, he knew something important about Ava. And he wasn't going to stop until he had her. But why? What did she have that was so significant? Without thinking, Ethan grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door, his mind set. He had to get answers. He wasn't about to let Ava fall into the hands of whoever had tried to take her before. "Stay here with Duke," Ethan said, pulling on his gloves. "I'll be back soon. I need to find out where that man came from." Ava nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else, something deeper. She was starting to understand, just like him. This wasn't just about escaping danger anymore. It was about uncovering the truth, about finding out what the man had meant by a key. As Ethan stepped out into the cold night, the snow whipped around him, the storm still fierce. He looked back once, seeing the soft glow of the fire through the cabin window. Ava was safe, for now, but he knew this was far from over. The shadows were closing in, and whatever was coming wasn't going to stop until they had what they wanted. The storm howled in the distance, but Ethan's focus remained sharp as he trudged through the deep snow. The cabin was now a distant speck behind him, the warmth of the fire fading into the cold, sharp reality of the wilderness around him. His breath came in visible clouds, the freezing air cutting through his jacket as the wind threatened to push him off course. But Ethan wasn't about to let the storm slow him down. He had no choice. He couldn't leave Ava in the dark any longer. The whisper, the voice, the mention of being special, everything was starting to fall into place, but the pieces were still blurry. Whoever that man was, he had been searching for Ava, and whatever he wanted her for, it had something to do with the place marked on the map, the military outpost. The woods stretched out before him, the trees heavy with snow, their branches creaking in the wind. Duke, his loyal German shepherd, padded silently beside him, his senses on high alert. The dog's presence brought a strange sense of calm to Ethan, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this. But the unease gnawing at his chest never eased. He had to know who was behind this, who was after Ava, and why. The military outpost was abandoned, or so he had thought. The map didn't make sense. What had it been used for all those years ago? And why did someone want Ava so badly? She was just a child. His mind kept returning to the words Ava had said earlier. "I remember something." What was it? Was it a memory from before the fire? Or something she had suppressed? He stopped near a large oak tree, his eyes scanning the dark horizon. The storm had lightened a little, the snow falling more gently now. But even as the wind softened, the hairs on the back of Ethan's neck stood up. Something was off. Something was coming. Duke's ears twitched, and before Ethan could react, the dog was already in motion, darting toward the tree line. "Duke!" Ethan shouted, his voice low but urgent. But it was too late. Duke had already vanished into the darkness. Ethan's heart raced as he followed, pushing through the snowdrifts, calling his dog's name. The night seemed to swallow him whole, the trees looming like silent watchers. The tension was thick in the air, a crackling presence that made the hair on his arms stand up. "Duke!" Ethan's voice cracked as he moved faster, panic creeping into his chest. And then he heard it, the sound of a twig snapping, followed by the soft sound of paws padding through the snow. "Duke?" Ethan whispered, his breath catching in his throat. From the shadows of the trees, Duke emerged, his body low, his fur coated in snow, but there was something in his eyes, a look of urgency, of warning, and behind him another figure emerged, cloaked in shadows, their face hidden beneath a hood. The wind howled louder as they stepped forward, their presence unmistakable. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The same man, the one from the fire, the one who had warned him. "Stay back!" Ethan commanded, his hand instinctively moving to his rifle. The figure didn't speak at first. They stood there, watching him with an eerie stillness, like they had been waiting for this moment. "You've gone too far," the man finally said, his voice low and cold. "You should have stayed away, Ethan. She's not your responsibility." Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. "Who are you?" His voice was firm, though his heart was pounding. "And what do you want with Ava?" The man laughed softly, the sound unsettling in the stillness. She's the key to everything. You think you can protect her from what's coming? You're too late. There's nothing you can do. Ethan took a step forward, his body tense. You're wrong. She's just a child. I don't know what you want with her, but I'm not letting you take her. The figure took another step forward, their voice cutting through the cold night like a knife. It's already too late. She's been chosen. And you're just in the way. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. The truth was starting to unravel before him, but it made no sense. What was this man talking about? Chosen? Ava? How was she involved in all of this? Get away from me, Ethan growled, his finger hovering over the trigger. But before he could act, the man stepped back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Ethan stood frozen, his pulse racing in the aftermath of the confrontation. What had just happened? Was the man serious? Was Ava really a part of something bigger, something that Ethan couldn't even understand? Duke whined softly beside him, his body still tense. Ethan looked down at the dog, his hand reaching out to stroke the dog's fur. We need to go back, Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet rage. He didn't have answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let this go. Not without a fight. As they turned back toward the cabin, the snow began to fall heavier again, a soft blanket of white covering the ground, hiding the tracks of the man who had just disappeared into the night. Ethan's breath was shallow, his mind racing as he trudged back toward the cabin, Duke at his side. The man's words echoed in his mind, gnawing at him. She's the key to everything. What did that mean? What could a young girl like Ava be a part of? And why had the man been so certain that Ethan was powerless to stop it? The cold wind howled around him, swirling the snow into a thick haze. Each step he took felt heavier than the last, but he couldn't slow down. He had to get answers. He had to protect Ava. They reached the cabin in silence. Ethan pushed open the door and stepped inside, closing it softly behind him. Ava was still sitting by the fire, her eyes vacant, staring into the dancing flames as though lost in her thoughts. She hadn't moved since he'd left, but she looked up as he entered, her face pale, her lips trembling slightly. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What happened? Who was that man?" Ethan walked over to her, dropping to one knee in front of her, his hands shaking slightly as he reached out to take her hand. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice thick with frustration. "But we're not safe here. There's something happening, Ava. Something I don't fully understand. But I'll figure it out. I won't let anyone hurt you." Ava looked up at him, her big blue eyes filled with an almost haunting sadness. "I don't remember everything," she said softly, her voice cracking. "But I remember his face. And I remember him saying I'm special, that I have a purpose, but I don't know what it is." Ethan's stomach twisted at her words. He didn't know how to comfort her. How could he? How could he explain to her that she wasn't just a child? She was a piece of something much bigger, something far more dangerous. "You are special, Ava," Ethan said gently, squeezing her hand. "But whatever this is, it's not your fault. You're not the cause of any of this. You're just a kid who got caught in something way over your head." She nodded, but didn't seem reassured. Ethan's heart ached for her. She had already lost so much, and now she was caught in a fight she didn't even understand. But he couldn't let her go through this alone. He had to protect her, no matter the cost. "Ethan," Ava whispered again, her voice trembling, "what if I don't want to be part of whatever this is? What if I don't want to be the key?" Ethan felt his heart break at the sound of her words. He didn't have the answers she needed, but one thing was certain. He would protect her, no matter what. "You don't have to be anything, Ava," he said softly. "You just need to stay safe, and we'll figure this out together." Ava wiped her eyes, her fingers brushing away the tears that had formed. I don't want to be special if it means people are trying to hurt me. Ethan stood up, walking over to the small window and looking out into the dark, snow-covered woods. The wind howled outside, but his mind was focused on one thing: the military outpost marked on the map, the one the man had mentioned. He had to get there, find out what was happening. What had happened to Ava? He turned back to Ava. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe," he said, his voice steady. "We can't stay here anymore. We'll head for the outpost. If anyone knows what's going on, it's there." Ava nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in her eyes. She wasn't sure if she could trust him completely, but at that moment, he was all she had. Ethan grabbed his pack and began to prepare for the journey. They wouldn't be able to stay hidden much longer. The storm outside was relentless, but the map was clear. The outpost was close, and if there was any chance to understand what was happening, to unlock the mystery of why Ava was being hunted, it was there. He glanced at Duke, who had already positioned himself near the door, ready to go. Ethan took one last look at Ava before nodding toward the door. "Ready?" Ava hesitated, her fingers twitching in her lap, but then she stood up, nodding. "Ready." As they left the cabin behind, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far bigger than either of them could have anticipated. But one thing was certain: he wasn't about to leave her alone in the dark. Whatever this key was, whatever purpose Ava had been dragged into, Ethan would make sure she never had to face it alone. The wind howled through the trees as Ethan and Ava made their way through the snow-covered woods. The storm had calmed slightly, but the cold still gripped their bones. Duke was at their side, his ears flicking with every sound, his sharp senses alert to any movement in the darkness. Ethan's eyes remained fixed on the path ahead, but his mind was racing. The outpost was close, but something didn't feel right. The man, the one who had tried to stop him, was still out there. Ethan could feel it. He was being watched. They walked in silence, the crunch of their boots in the snow the only sound, but Ethan knew Ava was struggling. He could see the way she kept glancing around, her face pale with fear, her fingers tightly gripping the sleeve of his jacket. "You're doing great," Ethan said softly, trying to reassure her. "We're almost there." Ava didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the path in front of them, her mind clearly elsewhere. Ethan couldn't blame her. She was too young to be caught in the middle of whatever this was. Whatever he was. The man had said it before. She was a key to something. But what? And why her? They reached the edge of the woods, the tall, snow-covered trees parting to reveal a small clearing. There, in the distance, was the military outpost, a forgotten relic, half buried in snow and time. The structure was surrounded by a tall, rusted fence, its gates chained shut. The windows of the building were dark, but there was a faint light flickering in one of the rooms like a warning. "Stay close," Ethan whispered, pulling Ava gently toward the cover of the trees. They moved toward the outpost cautiously, Duke leading the way. Ethan's heart was in his throat. The outpost felt abandoned, but the hairs on the back of his neck were standing on end. The man had warned him that it was too late. But what did he mean by that? What was going to happen once they reached the outpost? As they neared the entrance, Ethan's pulse quickened. He could feel it now, the weight of what was coming. The man had said they were too late, but Ethan wouldn't let that stop him. He had made a promise to Ava. "We're almost there," Ethan murmured, his voice strained. "Just keep going." Suddenly Duke stopped, his body stiff, his low growl reverberating through the snow. Ethan froze, his eyes darting around, trying to locate the source of the disturbance. The trees seemed to close in around them, and Ethan's instincts screamed at him. Someone was watching them. Then, through the haze of falling snow, Ethan saw it. A figure, cloaked in shadows, moving toward them. It was the same man, the one from the fire. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The man was moving slowly, his eyes glinting in the low light. He was too calm, too confident. "You really thought you could run?" The man's voice was soft, almost like a whisper in the wind, but it carried with a chilling authority. Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself between the man and Ava. His hand instinctively went to his rifle. "Stay back," he warned, his voice low and steady. "This ends now." The man chuckled, a dark, hollow sound that sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. "You don't understand, do you? It's already started." Ethan's mind raced, the urgency of the moment swallowing him whole. What did he mean? Had they walked right into a trap? The man's words kept echoing in his mind, like the soft crackle of fire before it consumed everything. Ava, standing behind Ethan, was frozen in place. Her small body trembled, but her eyes remained locked on the figure in front of them. Ethan could see the fear in her gaze, but also something else, a flicker of something he hadn't seen before. She wasn't just a scared child anymore. She was starting to realize the weight of what was happening. The man took another step forward, and Ethan raised his rifle, pointing it at him. "Stay where you are," he ordered. But the man didn't flinch. Instead, his lips curled into a slow, eerie smile. "You think you can stop me? You think you can save her?" "It's too late, soldier. The key has already turned." Ava gasped, her face pale as she stepped forward, her voice trembling. "What does that mean?" she asked, her words full of confusion and fear. The man looked at her, his expression softening, almost pitying. "You don't understand yet, do you? You're part of something much bigger than you know, Ava. You're not just a child. You're a part of the plan." Ethan's stomach twisted as he listened, his mind grappling with the revelation. Ava, part of the plan? What kind of plan was this? Who was this man? And why had he been hunting her? "You won't win," Ethan said, his voice rising with intensity. "Whatever you're after, I won't let you have her." The Skitama man's eyes glinted with something dark, something ancient. "You can't protect her forever. The doors are already open. The truth is already out. There's no going back now." Ethan's heart raced as he tightened his grip on his rifle. The man had crossed a line, and Ethan wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when Ava's life, her future, was at stake. Suddenly the ground beneath them trembled, and Ethan heard a distant rumble, like thunder rolling through the mountains. It was coming from the direction of the outpost. "The doors are already open," the man had said. Too late. "What's happening?" Ava's voice was barely a whisper. Ethan's eyes widened as he turned toward the outpost. The ground shook again, this time stronger. A low, eerie hum filled the air. The gates of the outpost were shifting, moving slowly, as if they had a mind of their own. The man smiled, his eyes gleaming with dark satisfaction. "It's happening. You'll see soon enough. And when it does, no one will be safe, not even you." Ethan's blood ran cold. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about Ava anymore. It was bigger, much bigger. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed Ava's hand. "We need to go, now!" But before they could move, the outpost doors swung open, revealing a bright, unnatural light from within. The ground shook violently, and Ethan knew that whatever was waiting for them inside the outpost was something they couldn't escape.